Many people still think that governance is only vested in the hands of the government, but then the reality is that it is completely dependent on the people. The factors of political science, the factors of economics, and also the socio-legal aspects also are a part of this entire governance standard. In its 1992 report, Governance and Development, the good notion of governance was written as the way in which power is used to regulate the economic and social resources. Good morning and welcome to the first session in Unit 1, 4th semester B.Ca, Good Governance in India, where we are going to speak about Introduction to Good Governance. Now, the concept of governance is a very new thing to India. Probably the reason here is that this is something where people always get confused between government and governance. But many people still think that governance is only vested in the hands of the government. But then the reality is that it is completely dependent on the people. The concept of governance is about getting the people involved in a socio-economic environment where everybody is aware of what is going around them. Governance is more intended in terms of bringing in a complete independence, a complete autonomy in functioning so that everybody can participate and bring in their best as far as possible. Now, according to United Nations, governance refers to activities of all political administrative authorities that govern the country. So when you go by the definition, definitely governance has got a greater atmosphere, a greater weightage in terms of the political and administrative factor. Meanwhile, as per the IMF, if we go through, this is also including the economic policy and the legal aspects also. So on both sides, when you start comparing the definition and you start understanding it, you will be able to see that the factors of political science, the factors of economics, and also the socio-legal aspects also are a part of this entire governance standard. So it's not going to be that easy. It's a combination, it's a mixture of multiple disciplines put together in order to understand the governance principle. In general, governance has the meaning, the decision-making process of determining which policies would be the best when we intend to apply them to the society. Overall, when you start deciding this, overall, when you start understanding the entire factor, we try to get into the nitty-gritties of it, where we try to make ourselves understanding that how can we go in depth to understand a policy? What are all the factors that one has to keep in mind in terms of making the system, making the society a better place to live in? So that's why I always say that governance is very important to the modern society. Now, the definition in the late 1990s, the World Bank came up with the first international institution to adopt the concept of good governance, leading to the arrangements for development of the general public. In its 1992 report, Governance and Development, the good notion of governance was written as the way in which power is used to regulate the economic and social resources. So governance after the 1990s started taking a new dimension where people wanted to understand it more from a regulator perspective rather than just a power perspective. People used to think that governance is something like a standalone power which is being vested with certain individuals who are in the central form of the government and they have the rights to exercise the power. But after the World Bank definition, we started understanding that governance is a mode, it's a method of making things accessible, making things feasible for the common people and regulating the best part so that everybody is able to benefit from the actions that are taken in the society. This is not just a high-level policy decision that we are talking about, but governance is also from the lowest level as far as possible. Now, when we start talking about the good governance, the definition of good governance itself is often based on the national and international organization. The aim of a governance model is to minimize corruption, take into account the opinions of minority, listen to the voice of the people, and make them use in the decision-making process so that you are able to actively address the needs of the people. So what we intend to understand when we are speaking about governance is that we are trying to understand the needs of the people in depth, in particular. So wherever we find that the red tapeism, or we find illegal activities, corruption, caste discrimination, any kind of activity that could disrupt the entire mankind, that could disrupt the society and the well-being altogether, we need to bring in the governance principle so that you are able to understand the factors, you are able to give a socio-economic justice to all the people. So definitely a good governance has got multiple standards which has to be understood so that we can deliver the right standards to the people at the right time. Followed by, when we start talking about the right principles, the most of the 8 most principles of the governance, let us start with the word called as participation. Why participation is very, very important in being the first principle here. It is the concept of good governance where opportunity for everyone is a voice to their opinion, and they have that factor that they can represent themselves. Participation is not just including your name in some activity. Participation is an empowerment that is being given to you so that you will be able to come up and represent the problem that has been happening to you, so that you will be able to tell the people where exactly the problem is. You're being given a chance to represent your problem, your situation to the society. So participation is very, very important, and this is like, the right of freedom to associate and express yourself. So this is very, very important principle that you need to understand, the participation principle. Followed by the rule of the law. To implement a good governance, the legal framework in the country must be enforced impartially. Very, very important. I'm going to stress on this point. Whenever we talk about the laws, rules, and regulations in a country, we need to keep in our mind very, very clearly this factor that the rules, the legal system, the entire country needs to follow, and the law is above all. Nobody is, above the law. Law remains to be equal. Law remains to be the same for any person in this society. You cannot be above the law. You cannot have any kind of special allowances against the system. So whenever we are talking about a legal framework, the legal framework has to be in complete system. The legal framework has to be in complete tandem to that system. It has to be in such a way that it is common for everybody. Then only we can build a governance principle altogether. Followed by transparency, which means to say that every policy taken and implemented by the government must be carried out under the existing regulations, and in addition, there must be a guarantee that any information that's related to the policy can be accessed by everyone, especially those who are directly affected by the policy. Now, when we talk about the transparency, the government must be able to make the people understand where exactly the policy is implemented. They should have a visibility in terms of the actions that is being taken. So each and every policy that has been created, the governance model that has been created should be transparent enough, should be trustworthy enough so that people are able to see the action and people are able to see that there is a guarantee in terms of that particular decision being taken and the outcome would be in favor of them. So transparency is a very, very important form that we are talking about in terms of this good governance principle. followed by responsiveness. Now, this is very, very important when it comes to the factor of good governance. What happens predominantly in India is that many a times we come forward and we give ideas and suggestions to the government. But has the government taken it and responded to the situation? Now, for example, let us say that even if you take a complaint to the police station or you represent a public litigation case in the court, what is the level of responsiveness that you are able to get as a citizen? That's very, very important. Why? Because every citizen wants some kind of response from the side of the government or from the authorities, the decision makers, saying that what action can be taken in that particular situation. Most of the time, what happens is that we compromise with the law. What we tend to do is that we tend to take things in our own hand and we just want to get away from the situation. So most of the time, the situation, the challenges, the society is facing so many negative impact where we see that the response level is extremely low. So that is why it is more important for the government to take a quick initiative, a quick response to whichever situation that is being presented by the citizens. So the citizens and the stakeholder, then they will start getting a belief, they will start getting a trust factor that yes, the government will stand by us at all time and solve our problems. Followed by the consensus oriented. Now, this is very, very important. Why? Because whenever we are talking about the word called as consensus, what is that we are trying to address? The fifth principle is related to the decision-making process, which is called as the consensus. Whenever we are using this word consensus, that means to say that let us take the opinion of everybody and take it into the decision-making policy system. Now, what happens is everybody starts speaking, but at some point of time, we just tend to ignore all of them. We just believe that whatever we take as a decision, that is the final. But here, what we want to do is that the consensus has to be accepted by everyone and it should not harm anybody. So whenever you are taking a decision, whenever you are submitting a policy level document, it needs to address the challenges faced by everybody. And the solution needs to be beneficial to all, which means in the society in large, followed by it should not create a negative impact to anyone. So that is why consensus oriented is a very important principle in good governance. Followed by equity and inclusiveness. Probably we have been talking about this word called as inclusiveness today in many forms and formats across the corporates, even in the public sector altogether. Now, good governance ensures that justice for the community, which means everyone will have the same opportunity to maintain and improve the welfare. Now, what we have to understand in India very clearly is that the approach in terms of equality that has to be presented. Many people think that in India, we are not a part of the society in the sense we have not been given a chance to be a part of it and we have the equal rights to go ahead and present and take forward things. Why? Because we still believe that there is an inequality that persists in our community to a large extent, and thanks to the political system and the socio-economic system which has created a huge gap between the citizens and the government altogether. So what happens here is that many people think that it is our fate. We have to just continue living a life just like this. We cannot go ahead and challenge the opinion of the government. Neither we would be in a position to challenge the decision or the policies that are being taken at the top level. Now, what we want in good governance is that equal opportunity that should be presented to each and every citizen. Everybody has the right to live a good life in the society. Nobody can be denied from their basic rights. So that's exactly where we want to point out this factor that good governance means that everybody gets the same opportunity. Everybody is included as a part of the society. You cannot demark anybody. You cannot demotivate or just take people out of the society based on caste, creed, gender, sex, religion. No, you cannot do that. That's not expected as a part of a good governance. You need to include everybody, and everybody's voice would be considered to be equally important. Followed by the effectiveness and the efficiency factor. Now, one side we are talking about the word called as effectiveness. The other side is efficiency. First, let's try to understand what is effectiveness. When we talk about the word effectiveness, that means to say that is it going to be beneficial? Is it going to create a result which is going to be by and large good for all? Is it effective enough? Is that a solution that can be considered to be the best? Effective in terms of output, effective in terms of decision, effective in terms of results. That's exactly where effectiveness comes, where I'm trying to see that the overall outcome of that decision has to spell success, has to spell some good omen to the people. I don't want to take a decision just because I am being entrusted with the power of making decision. I'm not just making a decision-making authority scenario here where I will just create some decision and say that, yes, this would be good for all. No, effectiveness of a decision can be measured only when you are providing the right kind of input altogether. So that's where the effectiveness comes, and the efficiency is more governed as a process where you will be able to see that whether we are able to run through the process efficiently, whether we are able to get the result clearly and correctly every time. So whenever we are talking about efficiency, I'm talking about the process factor where it is able to go further smoothly every time without any kind of problems, without hitting a barricade. So efficiency is more about a skill where I'm going to talk about how you can make the process even more better, even more on the improvement path, so that every time we are able to get a better outcome. Followed by the accountability, which is very, very important. All institutions involved in good governance have full responsibility of the public as well as improving the life, the quality of the people. So whenever we talk about full accountability, that means to say that every organization is equally responsible. They are equally accountable for their actions, for their reactions in the public. Now, many a time when we look into the Indian government, we see that there are many organizations which do not want to take any form of responsibilities for whatever that has happened. Now, whenever you read in a paper that a man or a woman dies because of a pothole in the road, or because there was an open drainage, or suddenly because a building collapsed or a bridge collapsed, people only want to get interested in the blame game, but nobody wants to take the responsibility of saying what exactly happened, who is exactly responsible for that, and what can be the solution in future to avoid this kind of a mishap. So that's exactly where accountability comes into picture. We need people to take charge, to take initiative of what is happening in the environment, in the system, and provide decisions so that they are effective enough and we don't repeat the mistakes in future. Now, followed by, when we come to this word called as collaboration, now that's very, very important. At the end, when I want to conclude this topic, I say that governance is a very, very ideal concept to achieve its goal. Yes, of course. Why? Because governance is an integrated process. Governance is a methodology through which many countries or many organizations can come forward and deliver their best. It is not something where you would see that governance is only dependent on government. Governance is a process where you would be able to see that we are able to bring in people from public, private, all walks of life and make the system even more transparent and efficient. But nevertheless, I would always say that the good governance topic is only on the paper. It's only something where people are interested in writing and talking about it, but to practically implement it, probably become a nation like Japan, it is very, very difficult. Why? Because it requires a lot of self-discipline. It requires a lot of motivation and it requires guts in order to accept your mistake and move forward. So that's where I say that the concept of governance is more from a swift and responsible action that needs to be taken, and it has to be done without any form of bias. Moment we bring into the parameters like caste, creed, and other religion factors, the entire concept of governance will get collapsed. The main aim of a good governance, please understand, is that the clarity in terms of taking your action, a clear-cut method, a clear-cut approach, so that you are able to solve the problems of the citizen and provide them a better life altogether. With this, I come to the end of today's session. I hope and believe that all the facts and figures that have been discussed through this session would be of a great importance to you, both in the practical walk of life as well as from the exam standpoint. Now, in the upcoming sessions, we would be talking about the theories of good governance and the other factors with the elements and process of the good governance. Until then, stay tuned, stay blessed, and stay enlightened forever. Thank you once again for joining me today on this wonderful session.